Imagine this. You wake up one morning, the sunlight streaming through your window, and for the first time in years, you feel a strange, unfamiliar sensation, a lightness, as if a weight you didn't even know you were carrying has suddenly lifted. You sit up, your mind racing, trying to pinpoint what's different. And then it hits you. The voice in your head, the one that's been whispering doubts, fears, and criticisms for as long as you can remember, is silent. Not just quiet, but gone. You feel whole. Not fixed, not repaired, but whole. As if the brokenness you've been convinced was your core identity was never really there at all. But here's the paradox. If you were never broken, why did it feel so real? Why did you spend years, decades even, trying to mend something that didn't need mending? Why did you chase after validation, perfection, or salvation, as if you were a puzzle missing its final piece? The contradiction is unsettling. You believed in your brokenness so deeply that it shaped your life, your choices, your relationships. And yet, in this moment, you realize it was all a mirage. A story you told yourself, a story the world told you, but a story nonetheless. What if the very idea of being broken was the problem? What if the cracks you've been trying to fill were never flaws, but openings, portals to a deeper understanding of yourself? What if the pain you've carried wasn't proof of your inadequacy, but a signpost pointing you toward something greater? These questions aren't just philosophical musings. They're urgent, visceral, and deeply personal. They force you to confront the possibility that everything you believed about yourself might be wrong. And if that's true, what else have you misunderstood? The tension here is palpable. It's not just intellectual curiosity. It's an emotional reckoning. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss of your own identity, and the ground beneath you feels unstable. But there's something else, too, a faint glimmer of hope, a sense that this realization, as disorienting as it is, might be the key to unlocking a life you've never dared to imagine. The question is, are you ready to take the leap? This is where the journey begins. Not with answers, but with a single, seismic question. What if you were never broken to begin with? To understand why the belief in our own brokenness feels so real, we must first confront the forces that planted this idea in our minds. It's not an accident, nor is it a personal failing. It's a product of something far larger, a convergence of psychology, philosophy, and societal conditioning that has shaped humanity for centuries. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The belief in our brokenness is one of these unconscious forces, a shadow that follows us, whispering that we are incomplete, unworthy, or damaged. But where does this shadow come from? Jung would argue it's born from the tension between our idealized self, the person we think we should be, and the messy, imperfect reality of who we are. This gap, this perceived failure to measure up, becomes the foundation of our brokenness. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer dug even deeper. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power suggests that much of human suffering stems from our inability to fully embrace our own potential. We are haunted by the fear that we are not enough, that we must constantly strive to prove our worth. Schopenhauer, on the other hand, saw life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom, with humans perpetually seeking something outside themselves to fill an inner void. Both thinkers point to the same truth. The belief in our brokenness is not a reflection of reality, but a construct of the human mind, a way of making sense of the existential tension we all feel. Society amplifies this belief. From a young age, we are taught that success, beauty, and worth are external achievements. We are graded, ranked, and compared, told that our value lies in how well we conform to arbitrary standards. Advertising preys on our insecurities, selling us products and lifestyles that promise to fix us. Religion, too, often frames humanity as inherently flawed, in need of salvation or redemption. These forces work together to create a world where brokenness is not just accepted, but expected. But here's the twist. The belief in our brokenness serves a purpose. It keeps us striving, consuming, and conforming. It keeps us small. And yet, it also creates a profound sense of alienation from ourselves, from others, and from the world. We become trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and self-rejection, never realizing that the very thing we're trying to escape is an illusion. The question now is not why we feel broken, but how this belief has shaped us. What parts of ourselves have we abandoned in the pursuit of wholeness? What truths have we buried under the weight of our own perceived inadequacy? The answers lie not in fixing ourselves, but in unraveling the story we've been told, and the story we've told ourselves. This is where the real work begins. The belief in our brokenness doesn't just live in our minds. It seeps into every corner of our lives, shaping our relationships, our choices, and even our sense of reality. It's a silent force operating beneath the surface, and its consequences are far more profound than we often realize. Consider how this belief distorts our relationships. When we see ourselves as broken, we either push people away, fearing they'll discover our flaws, or we cling to them, hoping they'll fill the void we feel inside. Both approaches are rooted in the same lie, that we are incomplete on our own. This creates a dynamic of dependency and insecurity, where love becomes less about connection and more about validation. We end up in relationships that reinforce our brokenness rather than heal it, because we've convinced ourselves that we don't deserve anything better. Our choices, too, are shaped by this belief. How many dreams have we abandoned because we thought we weren't good enough to pursue them? How many opportunities have we missed because we were too afraid of failure, too convinced that our mistakes define us? The belief in our brokenness becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, limiting our potential and trapping us in cycles of fear and regret. It's not just that we feel broken, we act broken. And in doing so, we create a life that mirrors our inner narrative. On a societal level, the consequences are even more insidious. The belief in our brokenness fuels a culture of comparison and competition, where worth is measured by external achievements rather than intrinsic value. Social media exacerbates this, creating a curated world where everyone seems to have it together, except us. This constant comparison deepens our sense of inadequacy, making us feel like we're the only ones struggling. But the truth is, we're all playing the same game, chasing the same illusions, and feeling the same emptiness. Cognitive biases like the negativity bias and the confirmation bias further entrench this belief. We're wired to focus on what's wrong rather than what's right, and we seek out evidence that confirms our negative self-perceptions while ignoring anything that contradicts them. This creates a feedback loop, where every mistake feels like proof of our brokenness, and every success feels like a fluke. Over time, this shapes not just how we see ourselves, but how we see the world, a place where we don't belong, where we're always falling short. But perhaps the most devastating consequence is the way this belief disconnects us from our true selves. We become so focused on fixing what we think is broken that we lose sight of who we really are. We abandon our passions, our quirks, our authenticity, all in the pursuit of an idealized version of ourselves that doesn't exist. In the process, we lose the very thing that makes us whole, our humanity. The question now is not just how this belief has shaped us, but how much longer we're willing to let it control us. The consequences are clear, but so is the path forward. It begins with a single, radical realization that we were never broken to begin with. This realization is the key to breaking free, but it's only the beginning. Breaking free from the belief in our brokenness is not a passive act, it's a rebellion. It requires us to challenge the stories we've been told, the systems that perpetuate them, and the habits that keep us trapped. This rebellion begins with a radical shift in perspective, one that doesn't seek to fix us, but to awaken us to the truth of who we already are. The first step is to question the narrative. Who told you that you were broken? Was it a parent, a teacher, a partner, or society at large? And why did you believe them? Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This space is where the rebellion begins. It's where we pause, examine the story of our brokenness, and ask, is this really true? Or is it just a story I've been conditioned to believe? The next step is to embrace imperfection, not as a flaw, but as a fundamental part of being human. The Japanese art of kintsugi offers a powerful metaphor here. When a piece of pottery breaks, it's repaired with gold, making the cracks not just visible, but beautiful. The brokenness becomes part of its history, part of its strength. What if we saw ourselves the same way? What if our scars, our mistakes, and our struggles weren't evidence of our brokenness, but proof of our resilience? This shift in perspective doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms its meaning. It allows us to see ourselves not as damaged, but as whole, complex, and alive. Mindfulness and self-compassion are essential tools in this rebellion. Mindfulness teaches us to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, to see them as passing clouds rather than absolute truths. Self-compassion, as defined by researcher Kristen Neff, involves treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend. Together, these practices help us break free from the cycle of self-criticism and self-rejection, creating space for a new narrative to emerge. But the rebellion doesn't stop with the individual. It also requires us to challenge the systems and structures that perpetuate the myth of brokenness. This might mean rejecting societal standards of success and worth, or questioning the messages we consume in media and advertising. It might mean building communities that celebrate authenticity and vulnerability, rather than perfection and performance. The goal is not to create a world where no one feels broken, but one where everyone realizes they were never broken to begin with. This rebellion is not easy. It requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. But it's also deeply liberating. It's an invitation to reclaim your power, your voice, and your life. It's a declaration that you are not a problem to be solved, but a person to be embraced. And this is where the final, most powerful realization awaits. The ultimate truth is this: you were never broken. Not in the way you thought. Not in the way you were taught to believe. The cracks you've been trying to mend, the voids you've been trying to fill, the flaws you've been trying to hide, they were never proof of your inadequacy. They were proof of your humanity. And humanity, by its very nature, is messy, imperfect, and beautifully whole. This realization is not just a shift in perspective. It's a paradigm shift. It redefines how you see yourself, how you see others, and how you see the world. It's the moment when the weight of your perceived brokenness lifts, not because you fixed yourself, but because you realized there was nothing to fix. You are not a project to be completed, a puzzle to be solved, or a problem to be overcome. You are a living, breathing, evolving being, flawed, yes, but also complete. This truth is both liberating and unsettling. It's liberating because it frees you from the endless cycle of self-improvement and self-rejection. You no longer need to chase perfection because perfection was never the goal. You no longer need to prove your worth because your worth was never in question. You are enough, exactly as you are. But it's also unsettling because it forces you to take responsibility for your life. If you were never broken, then the power to create the life you want has always been within you. There's no one to blame, no external force to rescue you. The responsibility and the freedom is yours. This realization also transforms how you relate to others. When you see yourself as whole, you stop seeking validation from others and start offering connection. You stop comparing yourself to others and start celebrating their uniqueness. You realize that everyone is fighting their own battles, carrying their own stories, and that no one is truly broken. This shift creates a ripple effect, fostering deeper, more authentic relationships and a more compassionate world. But perhaps the most profound impact of this realization is the way it changes your relationship with pain. Pain doesn't disappear, but its meaning shifts. It's no longer proof of your brokenness. It's a sign of your aliveness. It's a reminder that you're human, that you're growing, that you're capable of feeling deeply and loving fiercely. Pain becomes not something to avoid, but something to embrace, a teacher, a guide, a catalyst for transformation. This is the final, most powerful realization, that your brokenness was never real. It was a story, a myth, a shadow. And now that you've seen it for what it is, you can step into the light. You can embrace your wholeness, your humanity, your life. You can stop chasing and start living. The journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning. But now, you're no longer walking it alone. You're walking it with the truth, and the truth will set you free.